So we've been viewing this slow motion genocide without any capacity or ability to do anything about it. So that is why many of us welcome the lawsuit by South Africa and taking away that narrative. Because obviously, the lawyers representing South Africa at the court uh, opened up the history and said the atrocities should not be viewed as starting on October the 7th. We have to go back at the history. We have to go back to 1948. We have to go back to the displacement, the massacres that accompanied the displacement, the occupation, the ongoing siege against the people of Gaza, the ongoing atrocities against Palestinians in the West Bank. So that became part of the narrative now to a huge global audience, even if it was not sufficiently covered by corporate US media. It was widely covered by some other media, it was widely covered on social media, and then people got to see the live presentations made by the lawyers representing South Africa and the lawyers representing Israel. People got to see it live on when it was live streamed globally, as well as on the website of the International Court of Justice. And sometimes it's conflated. People talk about the International Criminal Court. I hope I didn't, misspeak also myself. But there are two different courts. International Court of Justice normally handles disputes between nations. International Criminal Court can actually handle charges against individuals participating in war crimes and crimes against humanity, which of course also includes genocide. So it took the narrative away from the monopoly of the United States. So that in itself was already a great victory and bringing back all the histories that sometimes corporate media don't want to introduce into these conversations. And then, of course, it also showed the power implicit in the nation states that comprise the so called global south, right? So this is a success and a huge victory, not only for Africa, but for the global south, of using that platform, the ICJ, which is a part of the United Nations, one of the organs of the United Nations, to wrest monopoly of the conversation away from the United States. And obviously, it opens other opportunities. Now that South Africa has elevated its stature, it's in the limelight. I hope that South Africa uses this sort of momentum to engage in other necessary conversations. South Africa should be much more engaged in the process of African economic, regional, and political integration. Be a leader when it comes to the issue of the unity of the African continent. Uh, and then, obviously, another obvious conversation that South Africa is now well placed to really exert itself is the need to reform the Security Council. We've seen how the Security Council has been a hindrance historically because of the veto power of the five permanent members of the Security Council. And we've seen over the last several weeks how the United States has frustrated all the attempts to get a ceasefire um, and to get Israel to stop the bombardment of Gaza by the United States resisting the ceasefire resolutions or vetoing a ceasefire resolution or even an attempt to discuss it in the Security Council. So South Africa should definitely take the lead when it comes to issue the compelling need to reform the Security Council of the United States. So now I won't go into the presentation of the case itself because many of us, of course, we saw it live. So there's no need for me to reenact what happened, except briefly to say I think the Irish lawyer um, and Obviously, I'm not used to how to pronounce this name. I think it's pronounced uh, Blaney Raleigh. I'm sure I mangled it up, but all of you know who I'm talking about. The name is spelled Blinne, and then middle is Ni, and then the last name is GhraLaigh. And forgive me for mangling up her name. She did a superb job in terms of making the argument, showing other examples where the International Court of Justice issued what would be tantamount to an injunction or a cease and desist, because the case itself would probably take, as many experts have pronounced, anywhere from 3 to 5 years to come to a final vote or resolution. But in the meantime, the court actually has the power to issue uh, a temporary relief, which is what South Africa is seeking, which would be tantamount to an injunction and call on Israel to stop the bombardment. So she made a compelling case showing other instances where the court intervened and saying, in this case, the need is crystal clear for a need to call for an injunction or a cease and desist. And then the other lawyer, of course, is the South African lawyer, Tembeka Ngukai, who then used the words of Israeli political and military leadership, beginning with Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, the president himself, the army chief of staff, and then the soldiers, to show the insightful words referring to Palestinians as animals, calling for their extermination, literally using their own broadcasts that were videoed, that were recorded, that were in print, to say that if you need an argument for intent, because one of the most critical things in genocide is not only the scale of the killing, but you have to prove the intent. Is the intention to destroy a population, an ethnic group, a religious group, to destroy that population in part or in whole? And Tembeka made the argument that certainly they made it clear that that was their intention. And then, in terms of the argument or defense by Israel, that these words were used by people who were not in a position of power